the four worst things that you could be eating food-wise, or that you could be doing food-wise, that is wreaking havoc on your erections and your overall health. So I'm going to start with the worst one, because I feel as though this is the one that so many of us use. And, you know, I'm calling out the brand. Yeah. Yep. And I want you to look at the label on Coffee Mate. Now, this creamer is in every office in America. It's in every hospital staff's wait area. It is all over the place. It's at the gas station. If you decide to run in and get some coffee, this is the type of stuff that they're using. So let's talk about it. Not just the powdered one, but the milky one. What makes Nestle Coffee Mate so bad for you? So this goes back to turning this bottle over and looking at the label. When you look at the back of the label, you will see that this is very high in canola oil. And they'll call it refined vegetable oil. They'll call it refined canola oil. But listen, it is very clear that a diet high in linoleic acid, which is what canola oil is high in. Now, I'm going to tell you this, but I also tell you, if you go to the leading heart organization in America and you look up healthy oils, they're going to tell you that these oils are very healthy. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I think it's an atrocity. When in a majority of the European countries, this stuff is freaking banned, right? So let's just kind of look at one study, for instance, here. The use of dietary linoleic acid for secondary prevention of coronary heart disease and death. So this was an evaluation that came out of Sydney, Australia, as long as 10 years ago, right? And so what they basically said is, listen, all the nutritionists, all the dietitians, all of these amazing heart organizations are telling us to tell our patients to stop eating butter and to really focus on these vegetable oils, which are supposed to be so healthy. So if they're supposed to be so healthy and they're supposed to cut down on death and dying and heart disease, then let's see what happens. Well, they did a study. And basically what they found out, and look at the red here, the advice to substitute polyunsaturated fats for saturated fats is a key component of worldwide dietary guidelines for coronary heart disease risk reduction. Basically what they're saying is everybody's telling us that these vegetable oils and all that are fantastic. In this cohort, substituting dietary linoleic acid in place of saturated fats increased the rates of death from all causes, coronary heart disease, and cardiovascular disease. Now, I want to remind you that blood flow to the erection is all about how diseased or how healthy are those arteries. If you are putting that Coffee Mate creamer into your coffee every morning and you're doing everything else right, and you are exercising, you're moving, you're eating, you're drinking the smoothies, whatever, you have a diet and your items in your pantry are full of canola oil and full of these other oils, then you are subjecting yourself to exactly what this study showed. The outcome was basically replicated several times over, and we still have these same recommendations from our major health organizations telling you guys to eat this stuff. I have family members that still to this day swear that since it's called vegetable oil, since it's called sunflower oil, since it's called anything that sounds healthy, that it is healthy, and it absolutely is not. So the first thing on the list of things that you absolutely should remove from your diet, now every now and then isn't going to kill anybody, but this should not be something that you're consuming every day, Coffee Mate, because it's got that canola oil in it, and it is high in linoleic acid, and it can wipe us out. So I also wanted to show you the plants, all of the oils that I want to make sure that you cut out. I want you to start looking at your bottles. I want you to start looking at your salad dressing. I want you to start looking at your cookies. I want you to start looking at everything you freaking buy. And if it says soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, grapeseed oil, canola oil, rapeseed oil, peanut oil, or rice bran oil, you want to try to throw that out and get something that doesn't say that on it. You know, it was tough on me because my favorite salad dressing that I was using, something just told me to look at the bottle. And I just assumed everything in the house was pretty clean. I looked at the bottle and it is just as plain as day. It said canola oil on it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I've been eating canola oil all these years as my favorite salad dressing. So these types of products are hidden in your food and you've got to search them out and do away with them. But I feel like that Coffee Mate, you know, as good as it makes your coffee taste, whether it's vanilla, hazelnut, all of that, it's got these bad oils in it that a lot of countries won't even allow manufacturers to put in their food, okay? So that's the first on my list. Let's see, which is next that I'm going to talk about. Next on my list, now listen, there's some great versions of plant-based meat. It can taste good. They can make it taste like anything. But what I want us to be cognizant of is when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about these should not be things that you are doing every single day of your life, right? First off, plant-based meat is processed meat, but there are usually 3 different types that we're going to come into contact with, right? The soy-based type, the seitan based type, it's Seitan, you know, I don't know, but you pronounce it seitan, which I think is a terrible name for anything that could possibly be good for you. And then there's the kinds that, you know, are using beans and things like that to really try to emulate meat. The most popular kind, the kind where you go into these restaurants and you taste it and you're like, damn, it's good. It tastes just like cheesesteak, or it tastes just like such and such. That's going to be the seitan. And what seitan is made out of is it's basically taking wheat, like it's actually taking the gluten from the wheat, the stuff that makes bread kind of chewy and you know, like you love that texture of the bread. That's basically what it's taking. And it is using that wheat as the form of the plant-based meat. The problem with most of the seitan that you're going to encounter today is that when it comes to wheat produced in this country, not only are we spraying Roundup on the wheat to keep the weeds away and things like that, but that glyphosate or that Roundup is sprayed again on our wheat to dry it quicker, right? So when it comes to wheat products here in the United States of America, they are so toxic when it comes to having glyphosate and Roundup on it that I would just venture to say that you should not consider this to be something that you are going to be doing every single day of your life. So let's talk about what the data kind of shows when we're looking at taking a product like seitan as your meat substitute, right? So first of all, I want to be very clear. I am not anti-meat and I am not anti-vegetables. I'm on neither one of those camps. But what I am is anti-fake food. And the problem with seitan is that it falls into the category of being a fake food. Treat yourself every now and then, but you should not be relying on this every day as your main source of protein. Because here's the other part about it. So we have the essential fatty acids that we have to have in our body to survive, right? So there's 20 that you just really need to have optimal health. And there's 9 of them that have to come from food products. We have to eat them in order to have it, to get them. And they're still considered essential, which hits home the concept of how food can heal you and food can make you sick. The problem with seitan is that it actually doesn't have any lysine in it. And lysine is so important when it comes to collagen production. Hello, we've got to have elasticity in order to get an erection. You got to have elasticity. And when it comes to arteries, you want to have elasticity when it comes to beautiful skin, right? So lysine is also important when it comes to muscle strength. You've got to have lysine in order to build muscle tissue. Lysine is such an important part of health that I find it very difficult to think that you should be eating a product every single day as your main source of protein that doesn't have lysine in it. So you got to be really careful with these plant-based meats. And then when they come out with the next level and they start making them in the lab and telling you that they're so much better for the environment and so much better for you than good old-fashioned grass-fed organic meat, is just not true. So when you're eating these meat substitutes because you're thinking, well, it tastes like meat and it's healthier for me, it's just not. It absolutely is not. And so don't fall for that. But what you can do is enjoy it because it is good every now and then. But if you think about it, taking wheat hydrolate and taking the gluten and just giving you a product that's all gluten in order and then putting some barbecue sauce on it, how in the hell could that be good for you? Right? Because we also know that gluten in too high a concentration will cause your gut to be out of whack. So please, please, please scale back on plant-based meat. And if you're feeling like you want a steak, well, hell, go have one. Just try to make sure it's grass-fed and organic and all that good stuff, because it really does make a difference. Okay? So that's number 2. Number 3, let's see, let me get this one off the screen. Number 3 is an all-meat diet, the carnivore diet. So if you know me, I'm all about teaching that everything in moderation is fine. The problem with a protein diet, some of your paleo diets, some of your meat carnivore diets, is that it doesn't have any plants. And you'll see them. Every day I run across a new doctor online trying to convince you that vegetables are terrible for you. I don't know where the hell this is coming from. And what they're all saying is the same thing. You've seen it, is basically, oh my goodness, vegetables don't want to be eaten by you. And so they have a protective coat and they have acids in it that will accumulate in your body and make it hard for you to absorb anything. Well, sure, that is a huge problem in malnourished populations. That is a huge problem in developing countries. They have actually even tried to make beans and create beans for impoverished communities that actually don't have phytic acid, right? Or that are combined with phytase that will break up phytic acid. But here in this country, where we can balance our diet and do a little of this and a little of that, it is not anything that should deter you from eating good old-fashioned vegetables. And what I want to do is just show you how very clear the data is that plant-based diets are really good for you. And so plant-based diet doesn't mean don't eat any meat. It just means that, yeah, I'm having a little meat, but the majority of my plate is good old-fashioned vegetables and some plants and things like that. So let me share with you this here. And this is a great study that comes out of China. And what they did is they actually looked at the association between plant-based diets and erectile dysfunction in Chinese gentlemen, right? And so basically, the way that they played out this study is they took 92 subjects who had ED, and then they took 92 people who didn't. And these people were really similar in the fact that they didn't really have a bunch of chronic diseases or anything like that. But one group had ED and the other one didn't. And so what they did is put together a really cool measurement system where they kind of looked and graded the amount of health, whether or not they had a healthy plant diet, or maybe they didn't do much plants or had a really heavily meat-based diet. And what was really clear by the end of it, and what they did is they actually had a questionnaire. They did questionnaires, they did physicals, they did blood tests on these guys. And this the survey was about 154 questions deep, which is why we didn't do this here, because nobody wants to sit and answer 154 questions. But so they asked them 154 questions, and really a big part of this was about, what are you eating? What are your dietary habits? And what they found is basically they scored it 1 to 5. Like if you got a score of 1, that means you were really high on the plant, on good quality plant foods. And if you got a 5, you really weren't eating very many plant-based foods. And if you were kind of at 3, that meant you were eating a plant food, but it was more like a potato or something that wasn't necessarily all that healthy. And what they found is that the guys who had ED were less likely to have really much plants in their diet at all, but they also had a lower nitric oxide levels. They found a positive relationship between not eating any plants to having higher BMIs, meaning they were fatter. They had more metabolic disorders. They had higher E-selectin levels, which are usually correlated with erectile dysfunction. And so basically, by the end of the study, it was very clear, and this was from 2021, it was very clear that the guys who had some plants in their diet were so much less likely to have ED than the other guys that really didn't do many plants. So this is ultimately what I see in my practice too, is that guys who either eat all meat and no vegetables, they're suffering, and the guys who eat all vegetables and no meat, they're suffering. So what you really want to do is find a healthy balance for you where you are mixing healthy, grass-fed versions of meat that are organic, if possible, with vegetables, right? Vegetables are not your enemy. For most of us, vegetables are actually going to help cure. Why do you think is it that we got so many testimonials from guys who are doing their E-function smoothies and all of a sudden getting erections? It's because they are now eating vegetables, because they're eating them through the smoothies. So they're eating plant-based, more plants, because they're getting them through the smoothies. So if you can't get yourself to stomach vegetables, if you just don't like them, you've got to find a way to hide them in things like Smoothie Recipes so that you can actually stay healthier and maintain erectile function for years to come, right? So the next thing that this is my last one, because I got 4 on here that I wanted to share with you. And this one is big. Oats. Now, my mom makes the best oatmeal cookies, and when I go home, she makes them for me all the time. And listen, there's no way in hell I could ever convince her to stop using Quaker oats and to use my organic oats for this part of this process. But our oats in this country are so full of pesticides that it is unbelievable. So I want to share with you, share for you this. So this is interesting because a few years ago, EWG.org starts studying breakfast cereals, and what their goal is to see how many of these breakfast cereals with the oats and the wheat had high levels of pesticides in it, because babies are eating it, adults are eating it, and so on and so forth. And so, interestingly enough, they've got these great articles like Roundup for Breakfast. Let me show you that again. Roundup for Breakfast Part 2. In new tests, weed killer found in all kids' cereals sampled, right? So then they go on to list 28 samples tested, glyphosate detected in 28 of them, so on and so forth. So this was in 2018. They've actually rerun some of those tests after, pretty much putting pressure on some of these companies. And so this is the latest data. Want to know if glyphosate is in your favorite food? So this is Roundup. This is the same stuff you get at Home Depot to kill off your weeds. So the levels have dropped significantly, but if you still look, you're still going down to our oats, our whole oats, the ones my mom likes to use in her oatmeal cookies, those Quaker old-fashioned oats, they still have 153.5 ppb of glyphosate in one sample. The next sample had 223. The next sample had 261. And why is this so important? Why do we care? Not only are we concerned because Roundup in other countries, now the United States doesn't seem to want to admit it, but in other countries has been associated with causing lymphoma, forms of cancer. We also have started to see it as an endocrine disruptor, meaning that it is disrupting your body's ability to make testosterone and helping convert more of it into estrogen. We've also seen in Wistar rats that Roundup or glyphosate, the same stuff that's piled up in the Quaker Oats and the Cheerios and everything else, that in women, when they expose, in female Wistar rats, when they expose them to Roundup, it doesn't necessarily affect them, but what it does, interestingly enough, is affect their male offspring and their male offspring's ability to reproduce, right? So you got to be very careful with this stuff. So this is a great article from the Asian Pacific Journal of Reproduction, which talks about the potential pathways of pesticides' action on erectile dysfunction, a contributory factor in male infertility. And so it goes through all of these great pathways. This is a great article for you to check out, those of you who are really into this type of stuff. But just to kind of summarize it, at the end of the day, we're finding that, remember, organic, when you eat organic, you're less likely to have erectile dysfunction. But when you're eating foods that have been laced with Roundup, you're more likely to have fertility issues. You're more likely to have low testosterone. You're more likely to have higher chronic disease all around. And in some instances, there's thoughts that you're more likely to develop certain forms of cancers. And this part of the article actually talks about what the theory is into why pesticides can be causing erectile dysfunction. And it really has to do with the fact that, one, they feel like they're responsible for killing off the cells in the testicles that are responsible for making testosterone. They also feel as though it is responsible for annihilating that hypothalamic pituitary axis, the communication between the part of the brain that tells the testicles to release testosterone. That seems to be disrupted with this process. And, of course, good old-fashioned blood flow. We can't leave that out. So at the end of the day, because oats are so doused in our country with Roundup, because remember, they're using Roundup in our oats and our wheat in two different ways, right? To get it ready to go into processing quicker and to kill off potential weeds. So we're getting double dosed with it. Double doused. And what's so interesting to me about all of this is, where is glyphosate banned? Well, it's totally not banned in the United States of America. But listen, Argentina, Australia, Austria, all these countries are working on banning it. Bahrain, Barbados, Belgium, Bermuda, Brazil, everybody's working on it. 8 out of the 10 provinces in Canada outlawed it. Colombia, Costa Rica, Czech Republic. I could go on and on and on. France is working hard on it. There's so much money in Roundup because what they did is actually pretty ingenious. They tricked the farmers into going with all the seeds that need Roundup to survive. And so we have a whole situation across the world where produce is kind of dependent on Roundup. So now what we're trying to do is remove Roundup from the process. And the more you know about it, the more you'll push local legislation and your grocery stores to buy more organic, but also so that we can push to kind of get Roundup out of our food and back in the lab where it should and could be. All right. So let's see. So I think that was my 4, right? I talked about the oats. We talked about an all meat diet. Please don't. We need vegetables. Vegetables are very important. We talked about over consuming that plant-based meat, particularly the seitan. I talk a lot about soy, so I didn't need to talk about that one again. And of course, good old-fashioned coffee mate creamer. Stuff is so good and so bad for you all at the same time, right? To the point where now what you want to do, if nothing else, is go home, Look in all your cabinets, all your refrigerator, any of the stuff that, like your staple stuff. There's 10 or 20 things that we all just buy every time we go to the grocery store. Make sure none of that has that list of toxic oils, right? Try to cut these out as much as you possibly can, right? And then I want you to leave here and go look up our most famous heart association and look to see what oils they're telling you to use. And some of them are unfortunately on here. Awesome. Great. Because remember, heart, cardiovascular health, and erectile health go right hand in hand. Awesome.